Welcome everybody. Erev Tov, Boker Tov, Soraim Tovim, good morning, good afternoon, good evening here in Israel from Jay in Tel Aviv and Lawrence in Modi'in, coming to you as usual, just the two of us, because Lawrence is not just back officing today, he's going to be presenting what I know is a fascinating and challenging webinar on the nature of climate change and the nature of the solutions to climate change from our perspective here in Israel, but with some global perspective as well. And we'll get to that soon, letting a few more people join. Welcome to all of you on Facebook. This is the final and 30th, I believe, webinar in a series of webinars we've been doing, average of every couple weeks since the first week in April. Took us a couple weeks after we shut down from COVID to organize, and have been presenting to you both webinars from people's homes and out in the field at the Jerusalem Bird Observatory and in the Gazelle Valley Park in Jerusalem. Maybe with some better production values and some support next year, we can come to you from more remote places in the field where we need more investment in our production. But meanwhile, we've had it's been a fascinating year. We've learned a lot about you. We've learned a lot from you. And we found out we have a lot of we didn't really find out, but we know we have a lot of talented presenters who are important experts in their field in all areas of nature protection, from the sea to the forests to the biodiversity, the plants, the animals, the mammals, the birds, and in some ways, we're going to tie that all together tonight in a presentation from Lawrence. Before we get to that, I just want to first thank everybody for being here. Thank everybody for supporting us all year, for engaging with us, for supporting us. Appreciate it all so much. I want to thank especially our dedicated volunteers, our boards in New York and in the United States and in Canada, mostly New York and Toronto based, but not only. Shout out to Austin and New Mexico, in Vermont, and in the UK and in France, where we have dedicated volunteers and followers, and all of you from around the world. Really appreciate your support. I want to mention, you'll see on the slide in front of you, and we'll hear more about it later, our end of year climate change appeal. Climate change is such a huge issue, and we have an important end of year matching campaign, and Lawrence will be explaining how you can support that and what that really will mean to Israel. So Lawrence, in some ways, needs no introduction to many of you. He's been here from the beginning, took on the new profession of webinar master, but Lawrence is a very dedicated resource development professional, really always out there looking for the best and newest methods and the most effective methods. And he's applying that same sort of determinedness and research capabilities really to the whole climate change issue and SPNI's work in it. You'll hear from Lawrence how our unique nature-based solutions to mitigating climate change can change Israel and affect not just this little piece of the Eastern Mediterranean, but environmental science and environmental action the world over. We hear a lot about it from Lawrence in the office. We appreciate very much his passion on this issue, and I'm so happy that he'll be signing off this year, 2020. First of all, I'm so happy this year is going to be signed off. But the fact that Lawrence is doing it with an overview of how we see the whole climate change issue from our perspective, I think there could be nothing more appropriate, and really nobody more appropriate than Lawrence to do this, to present this to this audience. So Lawrence, thank you very much. Everybody from around the world, thank you as usual. And write some questions in the chat, and afterwards, Lawrence will be speaking for 40, 45 minutes or so, and then we'll be taking questions and answers as usual. So thank you all very much. Lawrence, evening is yours.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I just want to correct you as per normal on one thing. This isn't our last ever webinar. We will be back in 2021.
I meant 2020, yes, sorry.
Okay, so we'll be back in 2021, and we have, I think I I've planned webinars all the way through until April now. So we've got a continuing schedule, lots of webinars, including for Tu B'Shvat. So we hope you'll stick with us in the future. But today's webinar is about the climate crisis and about what that means for Israel, both for the next 3 decades and beyond, because our history, our future is not going to stop in 2050. After 2050, we have, of course, 2051, 2060, 2100, 2200. Hopefully our human civilizations can be around for a long time. And when we talk about the temperature in 2050, that doesn't necessarily mean the temperature is going to stop rising by 2050. Hopefully we can slow the rate of carbon emissions and flatten the curve, and then create some miraculous technology to take carbon out of the atmosphere. But there's no guarantee of that. So whether these predictions are relevant, are correct for 2050, or whether we're going to have to wait until 2060 to see some of these worst case scenarios, it's pretty scary for those of us who live here. I assume that everyone can see the screen. Jay hasn't interrupted me, so I assume that you have, that you all can. So I am going to go on. So the climate crisis is, in our appeal, we've said, we've written, Iris, our CEO, has written that climate change is a threat, is an existential threat to Israel, that Israel may not be habitable by humans safely by 2050 if things go on. And this isn't just Iris speaking or what I think. Here we have a picture of Brigadier General Udi Dekel, who is the managing director of the Institute for National Security Studies, which is one of Israel's top think tanks. And they say that Israel must recognize climate change as a threat of the first order. So, many, the Ministry of Environmental Protection says that, and many other outside experts say this is a threat that we have to, face up to, and we have to prepare for. I've had a bit of some discourse with some donors who think I'm being hyperbolic, who think this is too, that I'm just being alarmist and this isn't going to happen, but it is. And I'm going to talk about why climate change is such a big threat to Israel over the next 40 minutes or so. Currently, to deal with this threat, we have a part-time staffer in the Ministry for Environmental Protection, 2 in the Ministry for Health, no proper scientific database, and there's no real budget for central or local government to do anything about climate change, certainly at a holistic strategic level. I had a donor write to me after getting the appeal and saying, the biggest threat to Israel is the Iranian nuclear threat. And I said to him, yeah, probably in the short term, you're right. There's definitely a strategic challenge that we have to, that our country has to face over the coming years. But over the coming decades, it's going to be climate change. And you would not imagine that Israel would be dealing with the Iranian nuclear threat with just a few part-time staffers. We have entire ministries, entire departments, secret, not secret, dealing with this threat, and ultimately we're going to need that type of focus on the threat of climate change. But it's all well and good, but why should we care? I care because I have a family here in Israel. This is my son Asher, who's currently 6.5, and he's a lovely little fellow. He's just started school this year, and in 2050, which is 30 years time, he's going to be 36, like I am now, and I'm going to be 66, according to my mathematical ability. He's only practicing at the moment counting 1 to 10 and adding 1 to 10, so I'm not quite up on my more complicated mathematics so far. And I know that many of you who are listening also have friends, family, maybe even be living in Israel, have children and grandchildren here, nieces, nephews, great nieces and great nephews. And this is really a talk and an appeal for the Israel that we're creating for them, because I'm really worried about whether Asher is going to be able to live in our Holy Land in 30 years' time, or whether he will, or whether it will be dangerous for him to live here and he'll simply become a climate refugee. I'm worried on another level about my house. My house is my net worth. Like I was very fortunate to buy a house this year. My mortgage will be paid off by 30 years' time, and I'm going to have to retire. And my house is my nest egg. But is anyone going to want to? Is it going to be worth anything if no one can actually live here? To me, that's pretty scary. And before I move on to the next slide, I just want to clarify about his future profession when I say that he wants to live in the rainforest. I feel that needs a little bit more explanation. Not only does he want to live in the rainforest, he actually would like to ideally go around with some very, very sharp swords and go off and kill any illegal loggers who are cutting down the rainforest and destroying one of our carbon sinks. So I'm not really sure what that says about him or about my parenting style, but there you go. So what has Asher got to look forward to? According to the Paris Accords, which I'm sure most of you know, was a non-binding agreement signed by nearly every country in the world, saying that we're going to limit the amount of carbon in the atmosphere to 1.5 degrees Celsius. As you can probably tell, I'm British, so I'm going to be sticking to Celsius because that's my native temperature measurement. But I've tried to be consistent between Fahrenheit throughout the presentation for our American friends. And let's be honest, Fahrenheit is actually much more scary than Celsius. Scientists have said that the upper limit for a safe planet is 2 degrees. If no action is taken by 2050, we're looking at a rise in temperature of 4.1 to 4.8 Celsius, which is basically apocalyptic. We are all going to, if the temperature gets to that level, we are all going to have to move to Canada, Russia, and hopefully New Zealand, because the rest of the planet is going to be a disaster area. Currently, according to all the I guess advances, commitments, and work done so far, we're not going to get to 4 degrees, but we're going to get to 3 degrees of global warming, which is a good 1 degree over the safe limit, and that's pretty scary. And this is the average. This is just the average temperature for Israel. We're going to have a much hotter Israel. We're going to have which is going to lead to wildfires and extreme heat, which I'm going to talk about. And on the other hand, we're going to have 20% less rainfall. We obviously, of course, live in a desert. And when it does rain, it's going to become much more intense. And we're going to get something called rain bombs. So I'm hopefully going to make a very swift transition to a video showing a rain bomb. I assume everyone can see it. Jay, you can see the video? Jay?
Yes.
See the bit. Great. Okay, so I'm going to just play this very short video of a rain bomb from Arizona.
Time. That's a full-fledged microburst. Winds in microbursts can easily top 100 miles an hour. Damage could be being done right now as we speak in this area, which usually is maybe a mile or 2 maximum across. But that is sort of the classic signature of a microburst right there that we are seeing.
Okay, if anyone is interested in helicopter flights in Arizona, there you go. So that's a microburst. So when I was just showing this to Jay a few moments ago, and I was thinking it too, I was thinking it looks exactly like a mushroom cloud. And it's, I guess the more scientific name is a microburst, but I think the more poetic and I think more apt name is a rain bomb. where we had
Lawrence,
Tel Aviv
Lawrence, I think it's on behind you in the background.
I think possibly the first one back in January 2020, so 11 months ago. We had where 40% of Tel Aviv's annual rainfall fell in 4 hours, leading to mass flooding in South Tel Aviv. Hilariously, for some, we had cases of people on surfboards and bodyboards, propelling themselves down the main highway in Jaffa. Not so funny. Not so funny was a couple it was an engaged couple in the 20s who drowned as their elevator got flooded, and on a personal note, the fiance, the man in the couple, was the son of our favorite of the owner of our favorite pizza place in Modi'in. So there's a personal connection even to that, and I think now, also, like, I don't know how to describe it, but now the fire departments are getting kitted out with scuba gear, so that a situation like that won't occur. And I've been doing some really morbid reading this year. So one thing that I have read this year, which I find very interesting and wanted to share, is that humans are not the first species to mess with the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. It's been proven probably, I think, 5 or 6 times now in the Earth's history, where the amount of carbon in the atmosphere has changed radically. And this has always led to a mass extinction. We're not the first species to do this. Actually, the first time was the evolution of plants in what's called the Ordovician mass extinction, which happened about 450 million years ago. And these plants started taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere as they were starting to start the process of converting the carbon dioxide into oxygen through photosynthesis. That's what I was looking for, and that reduced the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, which led to a period of global cooling, which led to the extinction of all these species, which were used to high seas and warmer weather. Okay, so just very quickly, Israel experienced a heat wave in September, which broke all the records. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but I just want to say, just keep an eye on these on these temperatures of 42 degrees Celsius, 107 degrees Fahrenheit and above, because this is a dangerous temperature for the human body. And also, again, we broke our electricity consumption record. Again, putting stress on our infrastructure grid at a time where we all, basically everyone had their air conditioning units on. Our cities, 90% of Israelis live in crowded cities. In fact, there's actually more than that, and we can only expect that trend to continue. That trend to continue in the years to come, because of something called the heat islands effect. Cities can be 1 to 7 degrees Celsius warmer than the surrounding area. This is due to our cities being made up of steel, concrete, asphalt, and of course being full of human bodies, which absorb heat and make our cities warmer than the outside world. Warmer than the area around the city. Once you combine this heat with humidity through something that we call, which is known as the wet bulb effect, you can get into really dangerous, not really dangerous, lethal heat conditions. So in Tel Aviv, I'm sure many of you have visited Tel Aviv and know about the humidity in Tel Aviv. So the average humidity in Tel Aviv in the summer, in June and July, is about 67%. So once you run that through the wet bulb coefficient, you find that the lethal temperature, a temperature which is dangerous to the human body, is over 41 degrees Celsius. That's because our human bodies we cool by sweating. And when and I'm sure most of you have some awareness of the laws of thermodynamics, in that if you are in that temperature, ideally wants to go from a hot place to a cold place. And that's how our fridges work, that's how our air conditioning works, and that's how our bodies cool down as well. So, once you get to the wet bulb effect, where the temperature outside, where the external temperature to your body is above 41 degrees, your body is no longer able to pass the heat, the heat from your body to the outside, to the environment. Your body just keeps getting hotter and hotter. It cooks from the inside, and you get organ failure. Obviously, we have air conditioning, which is great for when you're inside, but is also, again, works by pumping, by exhaling hot air. So it just makes the environment outside even hotter while it is cool inside. And at the moment, it's not really, I don't really see it as a solution. Like I read every winter about stories of Holocaust survivors and pensioners and Israeli veterans on disability who have to choose between medication, food, and heating. And which is obviously an impossible choice. They're all basic human necessities. And if we get to a situation where air conditioning itself is a life support system, and we're asking, our electricity bill was something like 9,000 shekel during the summer months. And it's we're looking at people who to pay that as well. That's an extra expense for people who are living at or below the poverty line. Ruth, is that right? 9,000 shekel? Sorry, that's my wife who's looking at me quizzically. People won't be able to survive that air conditioning. We saw in 2003 the heat wave in Paris, where 14,000 people died when the temperature was only 2 degrees above the average, because they weren't prepared. 14,000 mostly elderly people died over the summer months, over only a few days because of the heat wave. And lastly, just on the subject of heat, it makes us physiologically, psychologically more prone to violence. We already live in like a tough area. You don't need me to tell you about Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran. But I will say that we talk about wanting people with a cool head to make decisions. We don't want hot-headed people, and I think those adjectives are really rather apt for the fact that heat makes humans prone to violence. And there are studies on this. Jay, when I discussed it with Jay before, he didn't quite believe me, but I'm happy to share sources after the webinar about this. And that if we're talking about trying to cool down the situation or inflame tensions, again another heat-related word, we need to be making sure that that the heat, just by its nature, is gonna make cooling the situation down more difficult. So I just got this diagram here to show what would happen, what does happen once your body gets over 105 Fahrenheit. Which again, if we're going back to I'll just quickly go back to the slide. Those are temperatures that Israel has reached already on the hottest days of the year so far, and that was about 10 or 11 weeks ago. You can see here how heat affects the human body. This is this is from the soldiers in America. I definitely remember coming across stories about our soldiers, our 18-year-olds, suffering from heat stroke, while on basic training. I remember, just back in September as well, in the heat wave, Asher had his welcome to first grade event, which because of COVID was outside, and And I remember walking around with him in 41-degree heat and coming home and essentially having, you know, I had to go straight to bed. Like I was suffering from heat stroke. It was really unpleasant. Like I was totally drained, and you know, fortunately, you know, wasn't out in the sun too long, had something to drink, had a rest, and felt better. Even like this Yom Kippur, you know, those who prayed in Israel, our shul started prayers at 7. This is Yom Kippur, which normally, you know, I'm sure most of you know, takes 5 or 6 hours of prayer. So our shul started at 7 with the aim of finishing by 9, which we didn't quite manage that. We finished by 9:30. So you know, it was quite interesting. The principles are, the important thing is that on Yom Kippur, the important thing is to fast and then pray. So the plan was to pray as quickly as possible. No singing. They were like one bar singing, read everything as quickly as possible, and got home before it got too hot, because it was 30+ degrees. And of course, on Yom Kippur, everyone's fasting and can't drink. So hopefully we'll be back inside again next year. We'll have our vaccine. But you know, even that is how the heat affects us, and the danger of heat. So how can we actually protect ourselves through our cities? How can we strengthen our cities? Because this is what it's about. Like, it's not a lost cause. If we act now, we can mitigate the heat islands effect, and make sure that our cities are safe places for us to still live in. So obviously, we need to plant trees. I'm sure most of you know that trees, of course, increase the amount of shade in the city. Shade really does reduce the temperature around us. Again, hot wants to go to cold, so if we create cooler areas, it will bring down the overall environment from between 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, which is unbelievable. And I write here, not cutting down trees, because even this afternoon, I saw an article in the Globes which says in the Tel Aviv metro, they're planning to cut down 17,000 of the 31,000 trees along the line, and only planning to move 200 of them, which makes absolutely no sense to me, because of course people are going to need to walk to and from the stations, and they're going to need to do that under shade, lest they suffer from heat stroke, especially in the summer. So that seems like a terrible idea to me. And you know, we talk about, you know, SPNI does a lot of work within urban planning, and one of the many things we do is to look to protect Israel's trees. And unfortunately, some of the cuts we've had to impose because of COVID has reduced our ability to protect Israel's urban trees. But we need to be making sure that we're planting trees, and we're planting trees, especially deciduous trees, which are the trees which lose their leaves in the winter, because they're more effective than evergreen trees, like fir trees, to increase shade and evapotranspiration, which is just scientific terms for trees sweating and cooling down the city via their sweat and water and evaporation of water vapor. We need to use green corridors. So green corridors are a really interesting concept, which we don't really have in Israel, but is planned for Athens, which is obviously another Mediterranean city just across the Mediterranean in Greece. And they're trying to increase the amount of planned green areas in the city to boost air circulation. So they're trying to create all these cool areas within the city, which is going to move cooler air throughout the city, creating sort of artificially creating a breeze to cool everything down. And we're going to need to start thinking about designing cities to include those. These green corridors also obviously double as parks. If we install lakes and other artificial water sources in them, that also cools the city down. We need I'll come back to water a little bit later on. We need to start investing in green architecture. We need to be having not just solar panels on roofs, as Yossi and Iris talked about last week, but we need to be having green roofs. And actually, we need to be combining them together. Some research I did before this presentation showed that actually green roofs and solar roofs together are much more effective than the two of them separately. And they also bring down the return on investment to only the amount of time of the solar panels. Now that they combine by a green architect, by the living roofs, the green roofs, the vegetation cools the roofs down, which makes the solar panels more efficient, because solar panels are more efficient in cooler weather, which is something we should really take into account if talking about having cities and environments which are hotter than the optimum temperature of the solar panel, because they're not going to be able to provide the electricity the clean electricity that we're going to need. So we need to be making sure that our roofs are both, and we need to, especially in Israel, we need to start doing more research on that. Trees obviously filter out air pollution as well, and they absorb really significant amounts of carbon dioxide, and we're going to need to start taking carbon out of the atmosphere as well to hit our target of only 1.5 degrees of warming. SPNI does a lot of work inside the cities. We have our Kahila, our urban branches, who really work with city planners to build sustainable cities. And it's not even sustainable cities as a luxury. It's sustainable cities as a necessity now. It's no longer a nice thing to have. We are going to have to decide. We're going to have to plan our cities to deal with the hotter Israel. We're going to need to make sure that our train tracks do not melt, or are not going to buckle under pressure. And we're going to need to make sure, like in England, coming from England, it always made I laughed at it. It never really works, because you always have snow on the train lines in the winter, and in the summer, you can actually get to temperatures where the tarmac on the roads melts, which you don't really have here, but it's definitely something to think about. Flooding. So I'm going to move on now to the issue of flooding. This is definitely my favorite picture. You can probably just see it in the background of this slide. This is one of Israel's F-35 stealth fighter jets. The pride of our Air Force, our most top secret plane. Not even top secret because I have a picture of it, but it's our most advanced fighter plane. And this is it got flooded due to, again, the rainfall last January, in January 2020. And it cost millions of, this is one of our fighter jets, which we would need to probably definitely need to attack Iran. And it cost millions of dollars to replace all the electronics. I'm just going to quickly show another photo here. So this is just from the headlines from the Times of Israel, which is an English-Israeli news source on the website, on the internet. And this is Ashkelon from 17th of December 2020, so 3 days ago. And this new lake is right by, I think you can hopefully see it with my mouse. This is actually Ashkelon's Agamim neighborhood, which is translated into lakes, ironically. And you can just imagine, like, if I have no idea whether they plan to build in this area, but you could not build houses in this area. It would be a disaster. These people would lose their property. This area is not insurable. This is not an area you can build in. But we need to be using this type of area to collect the water sustainably. I'm just going to hopefully show another video now. So hopefully you guys can see this video. I'm sure, this is Nahariya. This is Israel's northern city of Nahariya, and again, this is flooding after after the major rainfall in January 2020. Okay, so that's the end of the video. So hopefully we're back to the presentation. Hopefully Jay will tell me if we're not. If you can hear the noise, you just missed the helicopter making helicopter sounds. But you can see the amount of you can see the amount of flooding and damage caused by it. I think it's estimated about 150 million shekel, which is about $40 million of damage. And we had to military vehicles were brought in to evacuate people. That was last, I guess, the last rainy season. Even in this rainy season, we've already had flooding in Ashdod, Ashkelon, Bnei Barak, Petach Tikva. These are all major cities. Nes Tzionah, like Hagar, who works for me in the fundraising department. I turned on my phone after Shabbat and looked at the news and saw flooding in Nes Tzionah, and I call her to make sure she's okay. Her and her family are okay. She has 2 little kids as well, and it's just like that. That's not normal to be calling my friends to make sure that they are. That they're okay. Their house hasn't been flooded because of rainfall, because our cities are not built to deal with flooding and runoff. It's just a concrete jungle, and the water just flows quickly and accumulates in places, and people have to be rescued by boats. So again, nature is the solution to these issues. We need to start really seriously implementing eco-hydrological management of Israel's river basins. We talked about this previously with Professor Paul Kay and Dana Tabachnik on a previous webinar. Sorry, excuse me. And this is about managing our rivers holistically, looking at the sources of the rivers, how they flow through agricultural areas down to the sea, how our wetlands work, and making sure that our rivers bend, our rivers flow slowly, so that we don't have such a so we just don't have all this water flowing downhill, at rapid speeds and accumulating in certain areas. We need to be planning our cities. We need to be. This is something that SPNI does. I'm sure many of you you took part in at least one of our Gazelle Valley webinars, and we talked about the artificial water system in the Gazelle Valley, where we have these pools which help manage excess runoff from 2 of Jerusalem's rivers. They flow through 5 pools, and it accumulates in the main pool, and then it goes round again, and the water's filtered, and it replaces Jerusalem's water table, its natural aquifer, with filtered water, because that's something that wetlands are great to be able to do, and wetland plants do. And we need to be looking to implement these types of nature-based solutions in cities, especially in areas prone to flooding. The picture that I showed you before of the flooded neighborhood in Ashkelon, that needs to become an artificial wetland. That needs to become a place where we're managing the runoff in the city to create healthy wetlands, not just to do obviously for nature, because wetlands are very, very important, but for us, because we need to make sure we have areas which are designated to be flooded. The green corridors, which I referred to before, they're perfect areas if we design them properly to be flooded in situations like this. We need to be thinking of our parks as areas which are great for us to spend time in and make our cities beautiful, but also these emergency areas where we're planning that our water that rain runoff is collected and can go safely into the ground, and is not flooding people's homes. Because if we get to situations where people's homes are flooding, one, insurers are going to stop insuring them, which means the people who can leave will leave and go to places which obviously they can get household home contents insurance, and the people who are going to live there are just going to be the poorest people, who are going to be susceptible to flooding maybe every year or every few years. And it's that's not an Israel that I want to raise Asher, and I'm sure many of you don't want to see. So SPNI does a lot of great work in urban nature. Like, we've been working for the last 10, I think now 11 years with the creating a revolution in how Israel sees nature as natural infrastructure inside the cities. I talked about the Gazelle Valley. We need to see many more of these projects be actualized. we need to be seeing that these are solutions to how we can manage our cities and strengthen them to mitigate the impacts of climate change. You know, I showed you the rain bomb before. You know, with that amount of water, you know, falling, we need to be making sure that we are planning and analyzing how we are sort of analyzing how historically flood-based, you know, drainage basins used to work, and we need to be strengthening those places and not covering them with concrete, because concrete is impermeable and the water is just going to run off on top of it. And so what we really need to be doing is looking to re-establish our wetlands along the coastal plain where it's viable to collect water, and in other areas of Israel as well. And I'm going to give another reason why that's the case. Disease. This is a lovely picture of a mosquito. And as I was beginning to, you know, as we were beginning to prepare the appeal, I was, you know, looking for examples of how, of real examples, not hypothetical examples, but real examples of how climate change is already affecting us here living in Israel. So, so you see the headline here again from the Times of Israel: a mosquito carrying West Nile virus found in Tel Aviv metropolitan area. Of course, this year has been dominated by COVID, which is another disease which is carried by, which is being transmitted by animals. And we're going to see more tropical diseases. More tropical diseases spreading from areas where they're normally found because of the temperature, because of the rise in temperature, to new areas where the population has no natural immunity. Of course, I'm sure many of you have heard of, were aware of Zika, which was the disease which was causing pregnant women to give birth to children with small heads. And that was a disease which was just like West Nile virus is a tropical disease which moved to a new place. And I went to Fiji where they had Zika, so you know, it affected me as well. Hopefully not to give me a small head, but I was in an area, just to clarify. So Gush Dan is obviously the Tel Aviv region. So we have West Nile virus, and West Nile virus is not a pleasant disease. In its most common form, we have, it just gives us, you get the flu. But in serious cases, you can develop meningitis, an infection in the brain, which can lead to paralysis, brain damage, or death. So about 1 in 150 cases can lead to meningitis, of which 3 to 15% become fatal. So that's about 1 in 1,000 infections. Tel Aviv, so the Gush Dan region, has a population of 4 million people, which means by 1,000 out of 4 million is 4,000 people. To just compare that to how many people died of COVID. So today, the count of COVID deaths was 3,074. Already in the USA, you can see the statistics there. 62 cases of this West Nile virus was in 1999, and 51,000 in 2019. There's currently no vaccine for West Nile virus. So how are we going to deal with this? I'm not sure if I got it on the next slide or not. I'll just go back here. So the best way to deal with West Nile virus is, again, is nature. We need to make sure, this might sound very counterintuitive, but we need to create healthy wetlands, because healthy wetlands have natural predators to deal with mosquitoes. What we don't want is to start having pools of tepid water all over, you know, Israel's central regions where mosquitoes are multiplying. That our solution is to start coming with pesticides, start spraying toxins into these areas, which then seep into our water system, and then we have to drink, or it goes into our crops. We need to be making sure that we invest in the nature, so that we have healthy wetlands where we have frogs, amphibians, other amphibians. Obviously, of course, the frog is as an amphibian. Other birds, other insects, which eat mosquito larvae and control the population of mosquitoes. So we're not having these infections. And we're not having to rely on such crude and frankly poisonous methods such as pesticides to control the spread of the disease. So what can you do? We need you to invest in SPNI. I've talked many times I've mentioned a few times, probably not enough times in this presentation, about how SPNI is already engaged in many of these issues, many of these issues from urban planning to the restoration of wetlands to management of our rivers. So there are still things which we're missing. And the great thing about, one of the things I really like about working for SPNI is that I'm working for an organization which does seek to create systemic change, to create change which is lasting and changes how the government acts and how Israel acts. So we've seen it in recent years with the reform of Israel's fisheries, implementing sustainable fisheries policy through a relatively similar process, in fact, as how I'm going to talk now. So we know that this process, that this plan will work, but our main issue now is that we don't have the resources to implement it. So what we need to build a knowledge base. As I said before at the beginning, there's no knowledge base. We need to provide that. We need to kickstart the process of how we can protect Israel's ecosystems. And once we protect them, we can start to really understand how we can harness them and how we can build them up and how to replenish them. We need to showcase more solutions for more nature-based solutions, such as green corridors. We've already seen very much in the Gazelle Valley how amazing it is. It's like it's being featured by the IUCN, which sorry, I really forget what the acronym stands for, but it's like the International Union of Conservationists and Naturalists. It's like the big umbrella organization for all conservation organizations around the world, and it's being showcased as a really key and world-leading nature-based solution. But how our cities can be managed, making a public park with protecting endangered species and combining that with managing, creating artificial wetlands. Having pools of water, having healthy lakes inside cities, cool cities down through evaporation, which again is something we're going to need if we're all going to live it. If we're all going to be, if 90-something% of us are going to be living in these overheated concrete jungles. One of the key things that we need to do is commission a financial modeling, which is an analysis to prove to the Ministry of Finance that there is no waiting. The longer we wait, the more expensive it's gonna get. The Ministry of Finance, unsurprisingly, is full of accountants who don't want to spend money. We need to prove to them that it's much more beneficial to spend money now, because if we wait 5, 10, 15, 20 years, the costs are gonna just grow and grow and grow. We need to start working now. And lastly, we need to work on educational programs and public campaigns. We need to be supporting our kids. We've all heard of Greta Thunberg, the Swedish teenager who has really inspired change across Europe and the world, in fact, with regards to the climate crisis. And there are budding Gretas here as well. We need to be supporting them. And public campaigns, like theoretically anyway, any government, but especially in this case, the Israeli government should respond to the public's desires, and we need to be creating a larger voice for the climate movement. I read a report over the last week saying that only a third of Israelis take environmental or climate issues into account when choosing how to vote, which party to vote for. You compare that to America, we have 42% of Americans, according to Pew Research, who take climate change into account when voting, and that goes up to there's a big partisan divide, and you have I think it's like 69% of Democrats who vote according to climate issues. You can see that in how seriously the Biden administration seems to be taking the issue of the climate crisis. What does Israel need? We need adaptation mitigation. I just want to point out that I haven't really spoken at all about carbon emissions. And that's because Israel is only responsible for 0.2% of global carbon emissions. I know we spoke last week in the amazingly well-received webinar from Yossi Iris about Israel's 100% climate plan. And we were all really, really excited that just a few days before the webinar, Bibi had talked about, yeah, Israel's going to be 100% renewable energy by 2050. Unfortunately, that appears not to entirely be what the report says. That the report says that we're going to be only aiming for 85. We're only aiming for 85% renewable energy by 2050. But ultimately, we're looking really we're very reliant on what the USA, what China, what the EU are doing to limit their carbon emissions. And I'm not especially optimistic, mainly because I see what's happening in New Zealand. That Jacinda Ardern, who is obviously a very popular politician, who is very much, I would say, woke and a paragon for socialist virtues, or definitely more left-wing politics. Even her government has been criticised for the lack of action on reducing carbon emissions. So if New Zealand aren't doing it, I'm a little bit worried about the rest of the world. So we need to be preparing Israel for a world for Israel anyway, which is going to be several degrees hotter than pre-industrial, than sort of 1950s levels, and certainly hotter than it is today. And that's why we need to invest in adaptation and mitigation, and that's why I haven't really talked at all about about carbon emissions. But I will say that anything that anything that Israel's government does, any policies that SPNI wants to see happen, need to be no regrets policies. And that basically means that even if we get to the best case scenario and either climate change is a hoax, which it's not, say now, or things are not as bad as I'm making out to be, that Israel is better off because of these policies, because of these infrastructure works, because of these nature-based solutions. We're all going to be better off with more nature in our cities. We're all going to be better off with cooler cities. We're all going to be better off with more beautiful parks. These are not bad things for Israel, and that's one of the keys of any policy that we want to see implemented.
Lawrence, excuse me.
We need to make sure there's a climate cabinet. We need to make sure that decision making is centralized. That there's interministerial committee like the Corona Committee or like the Housing Committee. Bringing together decision makers from. Ideally for us, we'd like to see the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, of course, the Ministry for Environmental Protection, the Ministries of University, of Higher Education and Water, and many, and I'm sure there's more which escape me now, but we need to be having that type of serious Prime Minister-led decision making and problem solving, because we've seen only through that does Israel really tackle the problems it needs to. We need to see the mainstream of the climate crisis and decision making. I've said before about the Tel Aviv metro area, the creation of the Tel Aviv metro line, and that we need to be making sure that when they build it, that there's proper ventilation for underground. Like I come from England. We have the London Underground, the famous tube network. And in the summer it gets dangerously hot, and we need to be making sure that we are not planning to build an underground metro system in our biggest metropolis, which is going to carry probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people a day, where we are just building it and it's not going to have good enough ventilation to cool people down, which is going to, it's going to be dangerous for people to go to travel on it, which is really very much not the point. And we need that sort of climate, and also making sure that when we're saying that 17 of 31,000 trees are going to be uprooted and cut down, these are all mature trees, that doesn't happen. The companies constructing the metro have to look for other solutions, such as, for example, not using public parks as storage depots for all the materials, but instead using car parks for their storage materials, even if that might inconvenience them a little bit. because it's going to inconvenience us a lot more if we start losing all our shade and all our healthy trees, which are absorbing carbon and cooling our cities down. And of course, we need to be making sure, we need to be advocating, SPNI needs to be advocating, driving to make sure there's sufficient budgets and governance and regulations and laws to make all of this happen, because it's not. Because without it, it's not going to happen. It's going to remain a pipe dream. So why do we have to act now? Ultimately, trees take time to grow and cities take time to plan and build, especially in Israel, where it takes 13 years from a house to go to be planned to actually be built. If we're talking about 2050, which is 30 years away, 13 years is just under a quarter of that time. So, and that sort of puts it into perspective. Israel, things always take a lot longer than they should do. And why should you donate now? Because thanks to a generous group of donors, and I know a few of them are here, and I'm not going to embarrass them by calling them out, but I just want to take the opportunity now to really thank them again for their generosity, for understanding the issue, for believing in SPNI and believing in our vision for systemic change. And thank you so much for donating and making this offer possible. That these people have offered to double the impact of your donation for any donations received by the end of the tax year, which ends on December the 31st. So please go to www.natureisrael.org/climate2020 and donate generously. I know so many of you have already donated generously this year. I know so many of you have donated generously recently, but please, if you have the ability, please give again. This is really for every person who lives in Israel, for every Jewish, Arab, Christian person who lives in our holy land. And if you value what our country is going to look like in the decades to come, please, if you can, please donate and make sure that SPNI has the ability to kickstart the process that is so desperately needed, so that we can rise to the challenge of the climate crisis before it's too late. I hope I've given you a double reason to give, but I have a double reason to ask, because my wife Ruth is pregnant, and in March, please God, we're going to have another baby. So I'm not just going to be raising Asher in this warming country. Please God, I'm going to be raising a second baby, and I really don't want to be living, bringing him up in a country with full of wildfires, where our cities are too hot to live in, where air conditioning has to be on all the time, where I'm worried in the winter storms that our house is going to be flooded, that the houses of Asher's friends and our friends and families are going to be flooded. So please, if you have the ability, please donate now as generously as you can. And I've got some more donation information here. Thank you very much. And I look forward to answering lots and lots of your questions.
Thank you. Lawrence, thank you very much. Tried to get your attention. Can you hear me? Lawrence?
Yeah, hey, sorry, you were actually on mute, so there you go.
Yeah, I know. We don't have much time. We're losing people.
Hey, sorry.
We've gone over.
Oh, wow, sorry, I really...
yeah, you...
Sorry, everyone. Okay, sorry about that.
Put me on mute next time.
Sorry.
So we have lots of questions, and many are not going to be answered. We apologize in advance, but Lawrence and I will stick here until, I don't know.
I'm happy to go through as many questions as we have time for. So
Lawrence,
go ahead. I apologize for everyone. The recording will be up later if you want to catch on the questions. Sorry for running a bit too long there.
Okay, we'll answer the questions and have them on the recording one way or the other, at least most of them. Some we'll get back to if you're very interested. But Lawrence, just to start here, Anita wants to know: doesn't Israel need to act in concert with its neighbors in the region if it's going to really mitigate damages to Israel, or are we talking about more micro mitigation?
Definitely, yes. We're definitely going to have to look regional and global solutions to dealing with the climate crisis. one thing that I didn't really talk about, because I don't really believe it's going to impact Israel so much, is our drinking water, which for sure is going to be devastating to our neighbors. Yeah, we're going to have to all work together. We're all in this together. It's a global problem. It's definitely a regional problem. Yeah, like for sure. But SPNI only acts in Israel. Like, it's very hard at the moment. I'm not gonna, sell you guys on regional solutions, which I can't guarantee are going to be creative. Hopefully, in a few years' time, we can revisit this and say, yes, SPNI is a leading regional international NGO working on the climate crisis. But at the moment, that's not something, due to the geopolitical circumstances, that we can commit to.
Great. Looking for quicker answers, Lawrence.
Sorry.
Are there somebody? I swear to God, I didn't ask this question, but someone wants to know: are there many coniferous trees growing in Israel?
Carnivorous? No, we don't have any trees which eat people.
Coniferous.
Coniferous. Yeah, we have. Yeah, with the JNF plant, conifers all over the place. Yeah, so all the JNF, most of the JNF trees are conifers, fir trees, Jerusalem pine and stuff.
Yes, and they're not helpful, are they?
No, we don't. No, we in wildfires. The best solution for wildfires, to help forests regenerate from wildfires, is just let the forests regenerate by themselves.
Great, and we'll be talking more about that issue on our Tu B'Shvat webinar in January 24th. Howard wants to know: is there any place you can direct to a compilation of information about the effects of global warming in Israel?
Yeah, I was actually looking for it before, and it all seemed to be down the ministry, the government's website. But the Ministry of Environmental Protection does have quite a lot of stuff, and if you Google it, there's loads of stuff out there in English. And there's a really good webinar from the INSS, from the Institute for National Security Studies, which I invite you to also watch. It's about 2 hours. Lawrence,
do you happen to know which tree species are more resistant to heat?
Yes, I saw this before. It's Mediterraneans. I think it's cypress trees, which are really, really great because they absorb lots of water and create a natural fire break, so they don't really burn. So looking for cypress, I think Mediterranean cypress trees are very, very good at this.
Cool. How will flooding? Do you know how flooding will affect desert ecology? Interestingly, let me say that. We know that it affects desert geology. We think that some of the increased flooding, the runoffs of in the Judean hills going down to the Dead Sea, are causing, or one of the causes of some of those sinkholes that are being created. What's happening underneath the ground? But in terms of the ecology of the area, Lawrence.
We've definitely, like last year we saw like amazing desert blooms of flowers because there's so much water. I would just say the water is, when the desert floods, it's pretty much flash flooding. So pretty much every time you get water in the Arava, in the southern desert region, what happens is the road to Eilat is cut off every time. So the Route 90 down to Eilat is cut off. So Eilat is, you just can't go in and out of Eilat while that's happening. But desert flooding is actually part of the ecological cycle. It's just, again, it's about the intensity and not about whether it happens or not.
A couple of questions about our environmental work, and let me just say a couple of sentences, Lawrence, and you can complete if you want. Someone wanted to know about the environmental literacy for school kids in Israel. I don't know how, if that's a thing, that Israel has goals of environmental literacy per se. Is SPNI and another organization in Israel over the last 25 years of mainstreamed environmental education in the school systems? We work in all the sectors. We work with the teachers and the staff as well as the kids. It's required in all elementary schools in Israel. We work more and more in junior high and high schools as well. And somebody asked about the curriculum. We basically write the curriculum. We have guidelines from the Ministries of Education and Environment. We write the curriculum. There's a pivot now about climate change. A lot of concentration on recycling and that kind of stuff. But and I wish we had more materials about this in English. People ask us all the time, but our work is in Israel. It's in Hebrew and in Arabic, but we don't have much translated into English at the moment. Lawrence?
I have nothing. I have nothing really to add. Just that I think that we do want to add more climate material, especially about carbon footprints and stuff, to our educational programs. And it's just a question of having the resources to do that.
Right. We're also working more and more. Somebody asked about Haredim, and are they part of the problem? The ultra-Orthodox aren't very represented in the environmental movement per se, but we work more and more in those systems. And I mean, the truth is, as Lawrence mentioned in terms of the politics, environmental consciousness, although outdoor consciousness is very high in Israel, the sustainability mindset is probably running behind where it is in most of the Western world. And in that sense, the ultra-Orthodox aren't that different from a lot of Israelis. But education is one of the answers, and Israel's on the uptick. And I believe there are the next Greta Thunbergs are in Israel as well as in many places in the West. Land loss due to higher sea levels? Are we expecting anything like that, Lawrence?
So I did a little bit of research on this. We're probably by 2100. The Mediterranean basin, the estimates are the sea rise is going to be between 44 and 102 centimeters. For Israel, I guess our main problem is going to be our sandstone cliffs, which are really susceptible to erosion. I haven't really seen any research so far on like what we can do. I think it's basically about creating again, going back to wetlands and creating artificial marshes along the coastline, because mangroves aren't really an Israeli ecosystem. Mangroves are a nature-based solution which is recommended, which is talked about a lot for more tropical areas of the world, and not so much for Israel. So we're probably looking at marshes to protect our coastal areas and to deal with rising sea levels. But there's a lot more research to be done, from what I understand, on sea level rise in Israel.
Yeah, one map I saw about a year ago, I think the Porter School was doing a study that a certain sea level rise up to the beginning of the next century will go up to what's called Ibn Gvir Street in Tel Aviv. That part of Tel Aviv will be underwater. I thought that was not that much. We could all move east of Ibn Gvir, but I don't know. I don't mean to.
I would say just on sea level rise, it's not so much Israel, but going back to the regional, like Egypt especially is going to be in a lot of trouble. Like Alexandria,
the Nile Delta. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the Nile Delta, like Alexandria is estimated to have maybe a population of like 200 million people by 2100, potentially, as people move in from rural areas, and that's going to create a lot of climate refugees, and I'm sure many of them are going to want to come here, which is going to create additional societal pressures in Israel.
Cool. Okay, wait, we had one more question here that I wanted to get answered, but I lost it now. Global warming a result of human activity or natural evolution is now speeding up due to human activity? Wow, Ruben, that's a big question, but I think that the fact that we're in the Anthropocene age and the human activity is affecting climate change, not just global warming, but global weirding is a pretty much accepted scientific truth, except in some holdout areas of perhaps science. Lawrence, you want to weigh in on that issue?
I'm not getting into whether it's I really not interested in getting into the science of climate change. Right. It's definitely happening. It's undeniable, and sorry, I'm not going to waste time on that.
Sorry. Okay. I think that's it. We've covered a lot of the questions. Wait, let me.
I'm going to have a quick look in the chat, see if there's anything that I want to do. Charles.
Wetlands. Wait, Lawrence, I wanted to mention, a couple of people have answered. Let me clarify what you said. You did say it the second time you mentioned it. It's not that wetlands are going to, why will wetlands mean fewer mosquitoes? It's counterintuitive. Lawrence meant to say, and he said the second time, healthy wetlands will mean fewer mosquitoes, because dying wetlands are just, mostly moist areas where mosquitoes breed. But healthy wetlands have amphibians and fish and birds that eat mosquito larvae, and that is what we need to make sure, that our wetlands are healthy ecosystems, and then mosquitoes can't overpopulate. Correct?
Yeah, that is basically the plan. Like if we have healthy ecosystems, they will be in balance, and we will not have lots of diseased mosquitoes flying around infecting us. That is certainly what we need to see, because the alternative is having wetlands just full of tepid water where mosquitoes breed happily, and yeah, that's the problem. So we don't want to see that.
All right. Well, Lawrence, you take a look at the questions, and I will just thank everybody one more time. We're still have 80 people sticking with us.
Yeah, the Dead Sea benefiting from heavy rains. Rabbi Cantor, David Julian. Not directly, but it means that we can open up the floodgates to the Jordan River, and eventually it will happen. Yes, mass transit to reduce use of private vehicles. Again, Michael, absolutely right, and that's definitely something that the Israeli government is going to is definitely talking about, and we'll definitely see that we'll definitely have to see how that works. But again, we can't build we can't we can't invest in mass transit systems which are going to then cut down all our existing trees. We need to find a balance. Hadassah, the EU Green Deal, something that I've worked on. Like the EU Green Deal is definitely there will be stuff that we should be looking to adopt or adapt. It's right at the beginning of the process. We're applying for one at the moment for grant funding for one project actually around the wetlands, about wetland restoration. So hopefully, hopefully we can we'll be able to benefit from the European Green Deal, although it's not directly meant to benefit us. Talking.
Lawrence, I'll just expand on that for people not familiar. The EU is going through its own Green Deal and really advancing a lot of sustainability policies. Part of that is that there's an EU funding stream where the governments of the EU pool money and support NGOs around the world, including in the Mediterranean basin, including Israel, to develop solutions for climate change, to advance solutions in particular ecosystems, to do things that are both scalable and replicable in other ecosystems. So yeah, we've been looking very closely at some of the money available for NGOs and are applying for at least one of those kinds of grants.
I saw one question or one comment I want to pretend that was the question I wanted to answer, which is about plants and extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And there's a really interesting and actually really terrifying study which says that basically because of the extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the plants are growing differently, and plants are actually becoming, the plants that we eat are such as rice and other plants have more carbohydrates than sort of the nutritional guidelines, and less vitamins and minerals. So even the hope that plants are going to grow more with more carbon dioxide is not something we can rely on, which is something which is also pretty scary.
Cool. Well,
cool. None of this is cool, Jay. But yes, I hear what you're saying.
Yes.
It's scary. Not cool. It's all pretty scary, and just obviously this is a systemic issue. Like we need to be dealing with this. Governments need to be dealing with this. There's unfortunately, there was I remember a few weeks ago, Shell put out a tweet saying, "What can you do to reduce your carbon emissions?" And it's like the answer is no, Shell. You need to reduce your carbon emissions. What we do in relation does next to nothing. It's Shell as the company. You need to be reducing your carbon emissions. You need to be stopping drilling and extracting fossil fuels from the ground immediately.
Yeah. We need to do things because the issues are urgent and they're grave, and a lot of the solutions take a long time to develop. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in tonight, for supporting us. We will be back in just a couple of weeks in early 2021.
Yeah, January the 10th we'll be back. We've one of our board members, Professor Avatar Gazit, who has actually restored a wetland, and I hope he'll talk about that. And it's really beautiful. And he just actually wrote an article saying that wetlands are actually one of the areas which may benefit from climate change. So that's that's definitely like an I'm looking forward to hearing about that as some type of counterpoint to this webinar. And I'm really amazed that so many of you are stuck around for the Q&A. And again, my email, if you want to contact me, it's at the bottom, international@spni.org.il, and I'm always happy to arrange Zoom calls or email conversations to continue this. And thank you very much for being with us, and thank you so much for all those who have donated, and thank you in advance to all those who are still planning to donate and sending in checks and everything. So really thank you very much. A Merry Christmas to all those who celebrate, a Happy New Year, and we'll see you again in 2021.
Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks so much for participating, and thanks for your support now and year round.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.